Hello everyone, Dr. Eagle here again, doing a short build video of the Chaos 550 Flyballless Heli kit. Actually I have the Super Combo kit, so we'll be talking about electronics as well. What we have is the new style Black Widow Flyballless head with us here. Before we install the main shaft and anything on here, I would suggest to go through every bolt, make sure there's thread locks in the each bolt and screws. Okay, as mentioned before, we're almost through the entire head of adding thread lock and all the bolts. Anything that's basically metal contacting another metal surface, like bolts that go back into the head here. You add a little thread lock. Just enough to cover the thread where it goes into the the hole there, so that you don't have to put too much, just enough to get it started onto the thread, and that's all you need. Be careful, by the way, when you pull this arm off, there's a little brass washer in there. Don't lose that, because you need that to space that between the bearing that's in there, so just keep that in mind. So I got this side done, just to give you an idea as far as getting all the bolts in there. In this collar here, there's two bolts, one on each side. I'm going to add thread lock on those as well. So we'll pull this first one out, add a little thread lock. Again, just pretty much just on the tip. You don't need a whole lot. Sometimes less is better. Just slightly screw it back in. Don't torque it down or anything, but you need to put the shaft in first before you tighten it up. Has a tapered end. The tapered end goes down through the bearing block, so the fatter side goes into the head. So again, with the hole lined up with the head here, once it goes in, you will slide this bolt in. I don't think it matters which way you enter the bolt, because they both has a cutout, which the nut will sit on from, will kind of get recessed in there, so it doesn't slide around as you're tightening it up. So we're gonna go ahead and, let's see, find the hole. Okay. Add a little thread lock right on the edge of this bolt, and we'll go ahead and get this nut on here. Torque it down pretty good. I mean, don't do it so much that you'll break the break the bolt. Once that's in, then you can go ahead and tighten up the other screws, bolts that's on the head, which is on the collar. It kind of clamps down on everything, and then you have a pretty solid piece here. Next step is to add the swash. Basically, it just slides into place. And then I would add the collar with the two set screws on it. I wouldn't bolt anything down right now, because I don't know the spacing that I'll need in there once I slide this down to the main bearing block. I got the head assembled, connected the connecting rods onto the swash. Another thing I want to point out before I forget is that make sure you Loctite the linkage balls as well onto the swash all the way around. With the swash linkage and everything into place, it's very smooth. I mean, there's no binding, there's no, anything. Okay, on to the main frame building process. I laid it out here so you could see what it consists of. You got the left side, or I should say right side, depending on how you're looking at it. The right side, the left side, the base plate, the mainframe mounting blocks. If you open the package, the longer blocks that has an extra screw toward the back, that goes to the boom support. So obviously those will go toward the back of the frame. So I kind of lined it up so you guys could see how the placement will be once you bolt everything together. Okay, we're back. All the frame mounts is bolted onto each side of the frame, as you can see. Added thread lock on all the bolts. So the right side and left side is done. Something I did want to point out, the base plate, this is the front of the helicopter. So this is the front of the main frame, this is the rear. The base plate, the way it's sitting, this is actually sitting in the correct position. If you notice that there's the way the cutout is, there's 2 extra slots right here, one right there and one on this side. That indicates the back of the frame so that it doesn't get mixed up. You don't want to end up having the base plate sitting like this, where the two extra slots is toward the front. They need to be in the back for it to be correct. Otherwise, you'll have a hard time getting the base plate onto the mounts because the main frame. Chaos has a triple bearing block. You will not see that on the manual, even though it's very clear that on the frame there are 3 sets of holes for the blocks. One up here for the top, one in the middle, and one below. The main gear will sit right here in between the middle and the bottom block. Just wanted to point that out. You won't see that, again, you won't see that on the T-Rex manual, but the holes are there, so just bolt it on there accordingly. While something else I need to bring up, while mounting the main bearing blocks onto the frame, you don't want to torque it all the way down just yet. You just want to snug it, but not so much that it's held in place tight how you would normally have it finished. The reason being is when you put the main shaft through later on, you want to be able to set that in there without any binding of the main block with the main shaft. Once the main shaft is inserted in through all 3 main bearing blocks, you want to put the frame on a level and flat surface, and once all that sits properly, then you go ahead and torque it down. Otherwise, you may get some binding between the main shaft and the main bearing blocks. Just want to point that out, and I think it actually brings that up in the manual, but I figured I'll mention it here as well. All 3 main bearing blocks, it's installed onto one side of the frame currently. The other thing I want to point out too is that the way to tell that the base plate is facing the right direction toward the front is that there's this little notch here on one side and not the other. So that way you could tell that it's facing the right way. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and bolt the base plate to the frame and go ahead and combine the 2 together, bolt everything. Again, don't torque down the main bearing blocks just yet. When I bolted these on, I kind of just snug them. I didn't torque them down yet. I got both sides of the main frame bolted on. Again, just snugging these bolts on the main bearing blocks and not torquing them down just yet until we slide the main shaft in there. Then I go ahead and torque them down. Have your motor mount in there. I particularly don't want to put this in just yet because it's easier for me to set my motor onto the mount and then slide the whole thing in there. Since there's no tabs on the motor mount, it doesn't matter putting this in at a later point. So just want to point that out as well. So all right, well with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get the main shaft in, get it sit perfectly flat, torque down all the bolts, and at that point I'll go ahead and add the base plate to it, and then the frame is pretty much done at this point. We'll move on to probably adding the skid and finish up the bottom part of the just came back from my kitchen. Got all the main bearing blocks, bolts torqued into the frame. When I had the main shaft slided through, make sure everything was lined up. It was sitting on a perfectly flat surface before I torqued them down. So now there's obviously no binding. As you could tell, the head is just as smooth as silk. I mean, spins freely. That's the way it should be. I went ahead and mounted the base plate. So that's already finishing up this last socket screw here. Bolting the skid horse onto the bottom base plate of the main frame. Just snugging up the other one. That's good. Okay, all the screws are installed. It came with brass washers. You have to add that. Of course, your thread lock. Make sure you put some of that on there as well. Now that the skid horse is on there, you got the pipes. I want to mention too, the way the Chaos skids comes, those little set screws are actually installed already. So if you're looking for a little baggie with these little screws, you won't find them. They're already installed into the skid horse. So basically, once you add your pipes through them, through it, you could go ahead and just bolt those on. Okay, just tightening down the last little set screw onto the skid pipes. When you're putting these little set screws in, or you're screwing them in, you don't have to go crazy. I mean, just turn it with your fingers till you feel a little snug. I mean, all they need to do is make contact with the skid pipes, and it'll pretty much hold it. I mean, I got the rubber nuts already. Next time we come back, we'll go ahead and install some servos.